wife complained, it meant I had to do something, fix something, be somewhere. I have learned, and this is advice from somebody who's been there, done that, has a t-shirt, that when they complain, listen. And you may not have to fix it after all. I have a fence. My neighbors dug the side of their yard down, and my fence has started to tip. It's been tipping for about 6 years. But I learned a long time ago that all I had to do was listen to my wife complain about it, and I didn't need to fix it. So, there's a message there. If you are married, listen. Okay? Now, my boss also said this: when the boss roars, when the boss whispers, it roars like a cannon. One day, my boss came into work and he had this customer that was just about to go out of business. It was a big trucking company. And he was contemplating, struggling, what he's going to do to save this loan. And as he walked in, the operations manager was there, and she said, "Good morning, Reed." And he was so busy focused on this $5 million loan that was pending that he just waved to her and mumbled something. And then the loan secretary, she was at the teller window, she said, "Good morning, Reed," and waved to him. Now, Reed is a very personable man, and he ducked his head and did this, said nothing to her. And then we had this receptionist, boy, she was good, but she dressed like she got stuff that you wouldn't turn into DI. And it was pretty obvious that she didn't have a very high self-image. And he walked by her and she said, "Good morning, Reed," and he just, and then sat down. He got some papers out, started working. Now there are 3 people who think their jobs are in danger. The receptionist is in tears because he didn't say good morning. When the boss whispers, it roars like a cannon. You have to be careful what you say and do, because a lot will be read into what you say and do. Now, with that in mind, a look, if you want to scare the bejeebers out of somebody, a look from the boss can do it. You don't need to dress them down necessarily. Daggers in the eyes can do it, possibly. You have to be careful about that. So, when you say, you take a minute to spend some time listening to an employee, what that says is, I am important. So be careful what you say and how it can be misinterpreted. Now, I want you to think about employees and problem employees. I usually ask at this point, how many of you have 100% perfect employees? And of course, no hands go up unless you're self-employed and you only have yourself. And then of course, by definition, we're all perfect, right? I want to tell you how to deal with a counseling an employee. This is a strategy where it's a simple, effective strategy to get employees to accept responsibility for what they do. All right, let's get started again, talking about problem employees. This is something called reality therapy. This is a simple, effective approach that gets employees to accept responsibility for their behavior. It's a few steps. They're in your book, but I'm going to go through them with you now. In a private, non-threatening setting. As you can see, this is non-threatening here because there's no desk between them. There's not one person standing over the other. There's not one person leaning out of a truck looking down at another. There's not one person holding a gun. Whatever. It's non-threatening. In a non-threatening setting, you begin with this. Ask them to define the problem. And the one that I always use is Nedra. Nedra used to be the personnel manager at the bank where I worked. And Nedra had a tendency to not take all the phone calls as they came in. And she kind of, well, to be honest, she didn't always answer them on time. She would sometimes wait for her messages to stack up, thinking that some of these little fires would burn themselves out. Well, some of those little fires didn't burn themselves out. They got to be big issues. So the problem was, and I asked Nedra, are you getting all of your phone calls answered promptly? Very carefully chosen words. Not words that are an indictment of her, or an insult, or a threat. Just a statement of fact. Are you getting it done? And she, of course, answered truthfully because she knew that I knew. So the next question is, define the consequences. Nedra, what happens when you aren't able to get all of your phone calls answered promptly? And the correct answer that she gave was, sometimes things that should have burned out, or might have burned out, or I might have been able to head off an issue, became problems. And the problems they became, if I had only known, if I'd only made that phone call. So, you asked them to define the solution. What is the solution? Well, the solution is obvious. She has to answer her phone calls. She has to return her phone calls on a more timely basis. Now, here comes a problem. Sometimes they have a hard time defining the solution. Sometimes they don't want to say what the solution is because it's so obvious. You might have to frame your question in such a way that is more obvious. Will answering all your phone calls on time take away this problem? You might have to do a yes or no question. It's kind of a leading question, but you have to do that sometimes. Try to let them identify and define the solution though instead. Now the next question is, ask them if they can do it. Now remember our rule of thumb? If you're not overworked, you're overstaffed, there will come a time when your employee will say, I can't do it. There's not enough of me. I get here at 7, I work till 6, I don't take a lunch, I don't breathe. I can't do it. I need help. That's when you find out. If they can do it, then ask them if they will. Ask for their commitment. This is very simple. Now the beauty of these few questions is that it works beautifully with children. When children understand the reality, and that is, it's my behavior that's caused this problem, they will respond. I was a soccer referee years ago, and I went to the soccer field, and there was a kid about 5, and his mother was holding him, and he was crying because it was cold. And he was wearing shorts and a short-sleeved shirt, and I asked him, what's the matter? And he says, it's cold. Well, it's cold for everybody. I didn't say that. I said, does crying make you warmer? And he said, no, it doesn't. And he shut up. Now that's the brief version of reality therapy. Okay, ask for their commitment. Now here's the final step. Let them report on their progress. Now the thing about being a supervisor is that your employees like to look good in your eyes. They like to know that you know they're doing a good job. So when you let them report and they get this feedback to you, and then you say, as if they were a volunteer, thank you. That completes that circle. They have taken ownership of the problem. They have defined the solution, and they are the solution, and you're thanking them for recognizing that, and you have one less problem. That is called reality therapy. Sometimes you're going to have to figure out a way to measure what that behavior is. And if it's just something that's subjective and you're saying, well, I think he's doing better, not good enough. You have to be able to quantify a behavior if you're going to be able to hold somebody to what their progress is. Use those steps in the workbook, refer to them, and try it with your kids if and when you have kids. Now, let's go on. I'm going from having a problem employee to hiring an employee. I have an MBA. Do you know how many classes they taught on how to hire employees? None. Do you think that's an important skill? It is a terribly important skill. Instead, they expect you to go out and go to expensive seminars where they teach you what you can and can't say. Well, here's the Reader's Digest version. I'm going to give you one question, and it's not even a question. Here's what you say when you have someone sitting across the desk from you or in the same room and you want to hire them. You do this. Tell me about yourself.